Okay, welcome back. Jenni, I have made you a co-host, so whenever
Great.
you're ready,
Thank you.
you're welcome to kick off. I think we haven't had you in any earlier Agile tours.
No, this is my first one, so thank you.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, Jenni, the stage is yours.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here virtually. And I have to admit, I struggled a little bit with this talk. I'm talking about redefining leadership in a not so normal world. And so there are a couple of things that are wrong with that, right? One, not so normal. This is crazy not normal and hard for most of us. Certainly hard for me, and I haven't been directly impacted, aside from not being able to see my family in the US or travel and be at conferences like this. I've been really lucky. No sickness, and I haven't known anybody who's died from COVID. So not so normal. This is so not normal. And the other part of that is the whole redefining leadership. And I think this is the kind of leadership that we have needed all along, and it's amplified during this time. So my talk today is about intent-based leadership and how we can use the principles and mechanisms of intent-based leadership to become better leaders, to enable people to feel valued and feel motivated, and really feel that they're worthwhile. And I think that's especially important right now during this pandemic. So anyway, that's a little bit about my struggles, and I look forward to all your questions. So please don't hesitate to write them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer everything. And if not, I'll answer afterwards. So, okay, I want to just talk a little bit about the journey here. So my background is in change leadership, working with leaders and organizations going through changes. And I was really lucky in the work that I was doing. It was marketing, it was employee relations, it was all kinds of product development, all kinds of things. And when I stumbled upon Agile in 2006, I thought, yes, this is the answer. Here are the answers. Here are the facilitation techniques that allow us to understand together and plan together and validate together and reflect together. And combining that about 6 years later, learning about the neuroscience. So I took a study in neuroscience and how our brains work in the workplace. And that was like, yes, now I have the proof of why Agile works, how we can use how we're motivated, how the science can support this way of working. And a little later that same year, I read David Marquet's great book, Turn the Ship Around. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. He has a second book also called Leadership is Language. Turn the Ship Around changed my life. So these are the pillars of organizational clarity and technical competency that enable us to give control, or enable leaders to give control. And that was the piece that was missing. So we talk a lot about leadership teams being the key to make Agile work. Ari talked about that this morning. And the mechanisms and principles of intent-based leadership are the tools that you can add to your toolboxes. And when we talk about leaders here, this is leaders at every level in the organization. And yet that is also not enough right now. So underpinning all of this is this idea, this value that we need to be vulnerable as leaders. We need to be empathetic. We need to show that we're human. And this pandemic has amplified that, right? So it has given leaders at every level in an organization a way to be more human, if you will. So there'll be some things in this talk also about that. So the principles of intent-based leadership, and I'll move a little bit off the screen here. So there's 6 principles, and I'll take each of these principles and share some stories and some neuroscience behind it. Push authority to information, tune control based on competence and clarity, make it safe for people, fix the environment. That's what leaders can do. We can fix the environment. We can't change people, but we can fix the environment. Then don't be good, get better, have that mindset. And then the last is act your way to new thinking. We can't think our way to new acting. So we need to act our way to new thinking. And these 6 simple, really, principles of intent-based leadership are a way to enable having more motivated, happier people who get better results. So it's not just all altruistic that, we want people to be happy, although believe me, I want people to be happy at where they're working and in their lives. But we get great results because when we're feeling more motivated, the dopamine shooting in our brains and our prefrontal cortex actually help us be more creative, more innovative, more focused. So all of these mechanisms are one way to help deliver dopamine into our brains, which helps us get to high performance, even under stressful circumstances or extraordinarily stressful circumstances that we're in right now. So empowerment versus feel empowered. I see a lot of KPIs, and for those of you who have heard me before, you know what I think about KPIs. KPI stands for kills performance instantly. I prefer objectives and key results. They're more specific. But yet, in any case, a lot of organizations still talk about KPIs, the key performance indicator, and empowerment being one of those indicators. And the fact that you, as a leadership team or executive management team, feel that empowerment is a key performance indicator, this is something that you then give. You give the power to someone else. And that is the opposite of feeling empowered. If I need to wait for someone to give me power, then I'm not empowered. So all of these mechanisms here around intent-based leadership enable people to feel empowered. It helps leaders have the tools so they can create a space where people feel empowered and you're not relying on giving power to people. So pushing authority to information, rather than, getting the information and then going up in the organization, making a decision at an executive level, if you will, and then coming back down the system in order to, share, here's the decision that we're going to make. Not only is that inefficient, and it's probably, leading to a lot of bad decisions, it takes autonomy away from people. It makes people who have the information feel like they're not valued in this organization because all I do is say, here's what it is, it goes up, decision is made, comes down, and it's probably not the best decision. It also leads to a lot of bottlenecks. So, we're waiting, right? It's that waiting and asking for permission instead of intent and action. So pushing the authority to the people who have the information. This is the whole idea about decentralizing decision-making. It is just a smart thing to do in an organization. And it's tricky, right? So for some leaders, giving that control, that decision-making control is really tough. So, well, I'm used to making the decisions. It's a habit that I'm in. And it's not that I don't trust my people. It's just that it's the automatic response. If somebody asks me something, asks me permission, then I'm going to give them the answer, whether they can or they can't. They need to come up and then I give the information down. It's just a habit that we're in the organization. We need to break those habits, continue to break those habits, and help our leaders at every level to give control. So how do we do that? Well, we can tune the level of control based on competency and clarity. And competency here is the technical competency of the team members. So the people in your organization, what skills do they have? Are they technically competent to make decisions about the work? And then the second part of this give control pillar, if you will. The second pillar is organizational clarity. If we don't understand the direction that the organization is going in, then how can we possibly give control? So we need to make sure that people have organizational clarity and technical competency as a leader so that we feel comfortable making the decision to give up our own control. And I want to just share one example of sort of the old habits getting in the way here. We're working with a bank, and during the start of the pandemic, the middle management team was really trying to figure out, okay, we need to have some people here physically in the bank, but we can't go over the number of people that are allowed in the office at a time. So we need to come up with this scheme of how are we going to have which person when and what days and all of that. So the line managers started doing this. And one of the managers was like, whoa, what are we doing? What are we doing here? Hello. We're not the best people to figure this out. Not only is it frustrating for us to try to figure it out, we don't know what people's schedules are. What if we just put it out there to our team members and say, here's the number of people that we need, and let them figure it out themselves? And they did, and it worked beautifully. So a great example of being able to give control and also fighting our old habits of thinking we need to make the decisions for the organization because we're being helpful, right? We're doing the right thing. So we need to break those old habits, and being able to give control by tuning competency and clarity is a tool for managers. So here's the give control. Yes. All right. So I want to go here to this graph, if you will. So we've got give control on the y-axis. And that's giving control to your team members or the team as a leader or a manager in the organization. And then we have here the competency and clarity of our people. So we've got competent people who understand what needs to be done. That's here. And the farther that we go here, the more technically competent and the more organizational clarity, the understanding of the direction that we're going that they have. So what is it? What's the first step? Is it up or is it to the right? What do we need to do? A lot of people think, yeah, thank you. A lot of people think we need to go this way. And in fact, one of the really great leaders that I worked with, had the pleasure of working with in the beginning when we were working with intent-based leadership as part of their Agile transformation, he was like, well, I need to make sure my people have the technical competency and organizational clarity before I'm comfortable giving control. And my question was, well, how do you know? You don't know until you give a little bit of control. You don't know until you go up. So you give a little bit of control and then you see what happens. And for some leaders, giving this much control is too much. So then my suggestion is, okay, give just this little bit of control here instead, just a little bit and see what happens. And then do a little more and then a little bit more and see what happens. And then maybe then we have a gap. Something happens. It's usually some kind of a mistake that happens. And then you can see, what's the gap? Is it technical competence? Or is it something around didn't understand what it was we were supposed to do, didn't understand what the customer wanted, didn't understand something? So that organizational clarity, what is the gap? And then you can address that gap as a team or one-on-one, depending on what it is. And then you give more control. And you keep going. So the idea here with this is that you've got something that looks like this, and it becomes a safer way for you as a leader or the leaders in your organization to give control because you're constantly tuning competency and clarity. But we have to start with giving some control. We need to trust people. And I think this has been emphasized during the last few months when we're working at home. so much of the time. And another organization, I have to tell you, it's not one that we worked with, but it's a horror story that I heard, was that the management team wanted people to keep their cameras on at all times from 9 to 4, so that they could go in at any time of the day and just check that the person was working. This is so the opposite of having happier, more motivated people, right? This is the opposite of giving control. This is so totally command and control, and is about, permission and waiting, and not about intent and action. So yeah, I'm glad to know that none of you are working in organizations like that. So the optimal sort of work environment is where we're doing this and this and that and that, all the way until we get to a place where people are really, really feeling like, yes, I'm happy and motivated. If we give control to people who don't have the competency or organizational clarity, either one of those two things, we get a space that's really chaotic. So we see this in organizations that say they're agile, but really it's all about, it's the myth of the cowboys running around making all the decisions at the team level, and nothing traceable in the system, and there's no prioritization. It's just like, this is what I feel like doing today, so I'm going to do it. That's chaos. That's the lack of organizational clarity. It's not competency, but it's the lack of clarity. What we see more often is the frustration part. So people who actually understand what it is we're supposed to do and have the competency to do it, but yet, my leader is either a control freak or just doesn't trust me, or whatever it is. And that leads to a lot of frustration in organizations. So be aware that our own maybe need for control as leaders, and I am a recovering control freak. Maybe some around me would say I'm not recovering. But I do know that when I feel the need to take control, that is my trigger to say, whoa, hello, what's happening here? And how can I give up control instead? So it's an old habit that needs to be broken, if you will. When we look at mistakes in organizations, most of the time the mistakes happen because it just doesn't align with the strategy or the goals, the objectives, the key results that we're trying to achieve. So these misaligned activities where people have control, they have the competency, but they don't have the clarity part, that's where we see most of the mistakes in organizations. So just be aware of that. And then, when I think about the lack of organizational clarity or clarity about the work, whose problem is that? Is that the person who made the mistake? Maybe partly. But it's me, right? Me as a leader or leadership team or the team members. The clarity wasn't there. So understanding that, okay, it's a learning opportunity here. So we can fix that by filling the gap. And I intend to is a magical statement in this process. So it does shift the culture from permission and waiting to intent and action. When we say, I intend to, we feel empowered. I intend to only have one Zoom meeting a week. Not quite there yet. Maybe I have one Zoom free day a week. I intend to. I have the power. I have the autonomy here. And I get to make that decision, right? I intend to. I'm not asking anybody for permission. I'm just saying what I intend to. I'm thinking out loud. So that's bringing transparency as well. And when you say I intend to someone else, maybe it's your boss or maybe it's your team member who's relying on you for something. When you say I intend to, it gives the opportunity for that other person to ask questions. So not give permission, not say, yeah, cool, sounds great, whatever, but actually engage in that discussion. So it's a magical point for communication as well. So saying I intend to gives autonomy. It gives transparency because you're thinking out loud, and it gives an opportunity for others to ask questions. And many of the times people do just say, great, go do it, sounds good. So I challenge you to say, I intend to, in order to get into the habit of thinking out loud, being more transparent, inviting questions, and bringing more autonomy to the team. The next principle in intent-based leadership is to make it safe. And I'll talk more about psychological safety in a minute here. The whole idea about leaders making it safe, especially now in this pandemic, I mean, there's so many stresses that we're under and so many things that we worry about. So working in an organization where it feels safe, safe to say I intend to, safe to say I don't know, safe to say I need to go and pick up my kids right now. We need to make it safe for people to do that. Another manufacturing company that I was working in, when the pandemic started and things started to shut down here in Scandinavia, Scandinavian manufacturing company, they were hit fairly hard with, sales totally stopped, obviously. So the top management needed to make some decisions about how to cut costs. Now, one could say if they were practicing intent-based leadership, maybe they would have pushed the authority or at least gotten some influence from people who have the information about how best to cut costs. But they did not do that. Instead, they did an across the board, we're going to cut back to 60% of our time. I bet you can imagine how things worked out. They cut back 60% time for people, so working hours, or said that you were only going to be paid for 60%. Yet somehow, some way, the expectations in the organization for the things that they were making didn't go down to 60%. They stayed at 100%. So here you have a lot of people in an organization already feeling stressed about the uncertainty of the pandemic, uncertainty about the work situation, and having the pressure to still deliver 100%, even though it wasn't, people were saying the right things. Oh, you need to work 60%. But the expectation that people had here in their hearts and here in their heads was that we need to deliver. That's not the kind of safety that we're talking about. That increases the amount of stress people feel, and it actually decreases performance, because when we're in a stressed state, our brain is telling us we need to just survive this situation. The fight, flight, or freeze turns on, and we are just trying to survive. So we're not able to get to great solutions. So when we look at the stress performance curve here, on the y-axis, we have prefrontal cortex function. And at the top, we're open and curious and interested, focused, creative, innovative. And at the bottom, a little lazy, bored, disinterested. And then on the x-axis, we have the amount of stress, or arousal, as the neuroscientists talk about it. And there are two neurotransmitters that are important here for performance. One I've talked about, that's dopamine, and the other is norepinephrine. And when we're at the right level, so when we're at the tip of that nice little curve, that's high performance. What the research showed pre-pandemic is that people were here on the right side of the curve with the amount of stress. So, and when we're in that stressed state, we don't think clearly. Our prefrontal cortex is not working at an optimal level. The dopamine and norepinephrine are not helping us get to where we need to be. And if the entire organization is also stressed, so now looking at the conditions that we're working in now, there's even more stress in the workplace, more demands on people, work and home, and we've lost that commute time where maybe we could de-stress on the way. Suddenly, our commute time is from our bedroom to the kitchen or whatever. It's really hard on the brain, really, really hard on the brain. And it's hard for us as leaders to think, okay, now I need to support and encourage people up to high performance. But yet that is what the research shows. So if we're coming in and going, oh, how come you're not delivering this? We're pushing people deeper into that stress state. And that's not what we want. So we need to support and encourage to get up to high performance. The other side of the curve, we don't see so often. Every now and then, maybe a scrum team is a little too comfortable, and then a gentle push, a challenge to get people to high performance. We need to have enough stress to perform. These days, we've got plenty of stress. So it's how we deal with that through supporting and encouraging our colleagues and our families in order to get to better thinking, high performance. So supporting and encouraging. Some leaders have a tough time with this, right? Maybe we're we're not the touchy-feely kind, and suddenly we need to be asking about kids and families and dogs and all of that. You need to be true to who you are. So I'm not saying pretend to be somebody that you're not. What I am asking is that show your vulnerability, show that empathy. So that whole idea in intent-based leadership about saying, I don't know, and inviting people to share what they're seeing or what they think or what they recommend or what they'd like to do or what they intend to do is a way as a leader that you can show your vulnerability. And simple things like showing your gratitude for your team, that doesn't require touchy-feely. Maybe there's a mechanism there that in the check-ins, whatever online collaboration tool you're using, if it's Zoom or Teams or whatever it is, maybe there's a time in the beginning where you just, hey, let's go around the room and do a real check-in or a real check-out. This is something that, we've done for years and years and years in organizations, right? So it's not rocket science, but maybe spend a little bit more time, especially during this time when people are working under these extraordinary conditions. So vulnerability and empathy are your friends. Use what you have naturally. So people will feel that authenticity. And if normally you're not the touchy-feely type, maybe you have a day where, you forgot to brush your teeth or your dog is barking or your kids are running in. Bring them in, show them. I think people really love that. There's this feeling of we're all in this together. We're humans together. So vulnerability and empathy are your friends in this way of leading in today. One of the tools, and I know that most of you have probably seen this empathy map before, and the Scaled Agile framework, I understand, in the new version is using empathy map. This whole idea of putting yourself in someone else's shoes, this is a tool for you. So if it's hard for you, if you don't sort of do this all the time, thinking about how does this other person think? What are they saying? What are they hearing? What are they doing? What do I think they're thinking? Or what do I think they're feeling? If you're not doing this already, this is a great tool to sort of get yourself into somebody else's shoes and figure out, okay, how are they seeing it? What's their perspective? And that will help you to sort of nudge people in the direction of feeling more understood or more valued. So it's a great tool that you can use individually, you sort of on your own, just as a thinking tool. I know some teams use it as well, but I think it's great for individuals just as a thinking tool, especially if there's somebody that maybe you have a hard time working with for whatever reason. So psychological safety is so important to the work that we do. and it's not enough, right? So the psychological safety is the foundation of feeling valued, and psychological safety without also having high performance standards, we're just comfortable. So we need to combine the two. We need to have this environment where it's safe for people to say, I don't know, or make mistakes, or try things, or say, I intend to practice different behaviors. And we also need to have high standards. So what do I mean by high standards? I mean that our quality doesn't go down because we're working virtually. Maybe our speed in the beginning went down, but I can say that most of the teams that we're working with, they're performing at pretty amazing levels, despite all the extra things that we had to learn to do differently in the beginning of this pandemic in the spring. So keeping those high performance standards are really important. It also is a way to challenge us, right? Because if we're too comfortable, we don't have enough dopamine shooting in our brains. We need to feel that stress, good stress. Eustress, it's called. We need to have that, and that's what we get from those high performance standards. So keep your quality standards, keep the ceremonies that you might be using in whatever agile way of working you're using in your organizations. Find ways that you can do it virtually. I'm guessing that everybody already has done that. It's okay to have those high performance standards and have a psychologically safe environment. That's when you get learning. So you get the high performance and you've got a learning organization. All righty, so fixing the environment, not the people. That is the next principle in intent-based leadership. You can't change anyone. It's impossible. I've tried. Doesn't work. But what you can do is change the environment. You can fix the environment. So if the networks aren't fast enough, or the technology isn't working, computers aren't working, you can get new computers. You can upgrade the internet speed. You can help people in your organization get what they need in order to do the job that they want to do. So fixing the environment, removing impediments, using an impediment removal board. So where you visualize what the impediment is, and then you put that into work in progress, and then it's done, is one way that you can fix the environment. Look at policies and procedures that get in the way of people doing what they intend to do. So there are a lot of things that you can do as a leader to fix that environment. Stop thinking about fixing people. It doesn't work. Fix the environment, and we can fix those virtual environments as well. Don't be good, get better. So this is the next principle of intent-based leadership. So this whole idea about continuous improvement, I'm not so sure about continuous improvement, right? That's a lot of pressure. But how about incremental improvement? Taking advantage of the way that we work in Agile, making sure we have the time to reflect together, to learn and improve, to invite feedback from people about our products, about how we work, so that we can take that in and use it in order to get better. So this is part of a safe environment, that we learn from our mistakes, that we learn from others, that we're not criticizing, and instead we're curious. How can we learn from others? How can we get better? And constantly striving for that in the way that we're working, and also as people. Even in a pandemic, we can be even better than we are right now. This is called the toward away continuum. And I think it's a great tool when we think about how our brains are organized. So the organizing principle of the brain is to minimize danger and maximize reward. And this continuum sort of shows that. Over on the reward side, we're open and curious and interested. This is when dopamine is at optimal levels in our brain. We see change as a challenge. We see that, yes, I can do this. I intend to. We intend to do this. And on the other side here, we're protecting ourselves. We're moving away from danger. We don't want to make mistakes. I can't do that. This pandemic is not allowing me to whatever. Now, some of those things obviously are real, but maybe some things are not, right? It's a perception that we have because we're in this space where our brain is just not working at optimal levels. And we're on this continuum all the time. So, you know, we may wake up in the morning and we're like, whoa, ready to go. I can do this. I intend to, and bring it on. And then, you know, maybe we watch a little bit of the news and suddenly it's like, okay, I can't do this. And I have to tell you that what we have seen in the last few months, I mean, obviously, I'm sure the psychologists can talk about this, is that this continuum has been maybe more radical, if you will, going from one side to the other. And that's okay, right? That's okay. What we don't want is to spend a lot of time in this danger space, because when we're here and the longer we're here, the more our brains wire in a negative direction. And in fact, the research shows that the more you're on this moving away from danger side, it only takes about 3 weeks in that space, and your brain hardwires to be more negative, more black and white thinking, more thinking, I can't, more permission and waiting, because if I just wait for somebody to tell me what to do, I won't get blamed for anything. So using the principles and mechanisms of intent-based leadership, we can nudge people toward this reward space. So when we push authority to people who have the information, when we fix the environment, when we tune our control, trust people, make them feel valued, when we focus on being even better than we are, we actually nudge people into that reward space where more dopamine is released. So understanding that how our brains work under stress, and this is definitely a stressful time, can help leaders at every level in the organization to design interactions, the language we use to help nudge people in the direction of feeling more reward. Things like, if somebody says, I can't, just add the word yet. I can't. Okay, you can't yet. That changes things. Talking about we instead of they. So using that kind of language, being more vulnerable, helps nudge people to a space where they feel more reward. So the last principle is act your way to new thinking. We can't think our way to new acting. It's just not possible. And if you think about the different change models in the world, they all share similar things. We're in a space that we're in right now, and then we need to do something different, act in a different way, and then we refreeze into a new space. And that is the only way that we can change our habits, where we can take in the ways of leading that we should have been doing all along, right? Because this is how we help people feel empowered, where they feel valued and motivated and get to great solutions. So we need to act our way to new thinking, actually do something, even though it feels uncomfortable, even though, you know, our old habits will kick in. And I mentioned earlier my inner control freak. Even after working with Agile, using Agile methodologies and principles and practices for however many years it's been now, 14 years, if something is really stressing me out, I immediately want to take control. And I use that as a trigger to help me remember, aha, I need to do something different. So act your way to new thinking. And that will lead to this mindset shift. So the more that you act your way to new thinking, the more you shift how you think about the work, about leadership, about the organization, about anything. So there's a greater willingness to experiment, to try new things and learn from those things. And there's focus on progress over time. And then that desire to learn from others. So without judging and just really taking things in. So these principles of intent-based leadership, yeah, they redefine leadership. but not just during a pandemic. It is a way to make Agile work. It is a way to help people feel valued. It is a way to nudge people into better thinking, where more dopamine is being released in the brain, where there's more transparency, more autonomy, more great solutions in an organization. So thank you very much. And I look forward to your questions here. Let's see if I can bring this up.
Captain, I intend to ask a few questions.
Great, thank you.
Now you know I read the book. That was just a coincidence. I read it a couple of months ago. So really, I could relate to so many things that you said. But we definitely have a few very good questions from the participants. So let's get started with them. What if team does not want responsibility? How to engage them?
Yeah, great question. And that's an old habit, right? You know, we're used to maybe somebody telling us what to do, or maybe in our previous job, we got punished in some way because we did something without asking someone first. And then, you know, that feeling has stayed with us. So we're afraid to do something. So one way that leaders can help people to take more responsibility is to invite people. We call it up the ladder. So first starting with, okay, tell me what you see. So if somebody comes to you and says, tell me what to do, I want you to tell me what to do here. Instead of telling them what to do, say, okay, tell me what you see. What is it that you see around you? And then maybe they'll share their observations. All right, so based on those observations, what do you think we should do? And if they're like, oh, I don't get paid to think, you need to tell me what to do, then you can say, okay, all right. So based on what you're saying, yeah, maybe, how about if we do this? What do you think about that? Okay, great. And then the next time they come to you, instead of saying, what do you see? You say, so what do you think we should do? I don't know. You tell me. All right, tell me what you see. So you're kind of going back down to the see. So starting with what do you see, and then what do you think? And then what would you like to do? What do you intend to do? So there's a way of asking questions, inviting people in a space that feels safe. So getting them into the habit, and the more you do it, the quicker they'll get up to that I intend to level. But start small if people are afraid. So just by asking, hey, okay, tell me what you see. So don't give the immediate answer. Instead, invite them to share with you what they're seeing around or what they're thinking about this.
Yeah, as myself, I am in a leadership position at work. I could really feel the pain in the question because sometimes for people it's just so comfortable to be in the position of like, yeah, you tell me what to do. I do. If I do a mistake, it's you to blame.
Yeah.
You know. Okay. Next, really good question is, if you're not in the top management, how to request for more controls?
Yeah, so it works in the reverse, if you will. So if your boss doesn't want to give control or is in the habit of being the decision maker, a way to do that is to, you know, go to the boss and say, hey, are you interested in knowing what I think about this? And if the boss is like, no, I don't want to know what you think, then you could say, okay, well, are you interested in my observations, what I'm seeing and hearing around the organization about this particular thing? And usually most leaders both will say yes to, yeah, tell me your observations. And most of the time they'll also say, hey, you know, tell me what you think. They're open to that. So get them in the habit, get your bosses in the habit of you coming to them with telling them what you think. And then when they feel comfortable with that, or you're willing to risk it, you can say, hey, you know, would you like to know what I recommend that we do? My guess is they'll probably say yes. And then after a while, you can say, hey, I intend to. And then the boss might go, whoa, hello, what do you mean you intend to? Tell me more about that. Over time, you can be in that position. I really like the up to I intend to, because if you go farther than that and come back to the boss and say, hey, boss, this is what I did yesterday, there's no opportunity for communication and there's no opportunity to ask questions, and it makes people sort of pull back. It's like, whoa, I gave too much control, suddenly this person's running around doing stuff that I don't know about. It's scary for the boss. So we need to help leaders at every level in the organization, and that leading up by just asking the question, hey, would you like to know what I'm seeing or hearing in the organization? Or would you like to know what I think? Or even, hey, this is what I recommend. What do you think about that? Something like that.
I can see this tip being employed right away in any organization. Are you interested in what I think? This is beautiful, Jenni.
Great.
Okay, I think, well, we have one more question. I believe the answer to the previous question fits here as well. The question is lengthy, so maybe I will shorten it. So the team is saying we're an agile development team and we're working in iterations, but the management is tending to stop any sort of interim releases, like a minimum viable product where the product isn't as beautiful as it probably should be at the very end. And the team is wondering if there are any mechanisms to prove to management that an MVP release, which is not yet perfect, is also something we should actually go for.
Yeah. So this is a great example of what Ari talked about this morning, right? About the leadership team. And there are ways that we can help our leadership teams or executive management teams and organizations understand agile ways of working in a more common sense kind of way. So getting early feedback on something. The only way we can get early feedback that would guide the direction, to tell us, hey, are we following the value here in what we're developing, is by showing it, right? Showing that to our customers or whatever, stakeholders. It may be not a release after 2 weeks to the public, if you will, but it could be, a small release just outside the organizational system in order to test to see that it works. And I really like earliest testable, earliest usable, earliest lovable instead of MVP, because it's clearer about what it is that we're getting. Sometimes when we talk about minimum viable products, what's minimum to the team and viable to the team is certainly not minimal or viable to executive management or to the brand people or, security people or whoever it might be in the organization. So if we can talk about those releases in a different kind of way and really, really focus on the feedback, because if we don't get the feedback, we don't know if we're doing the right thing. And in this age, we can't afford to wait 6 months or a year or whatever to get that feedback. And the market just moves way too fast, no matter what industry you're in. So, and talking about it in those kinds of business terms, money loss, sharing stories about other organizations that waited too long to get feedback or act is also a good way to help those managers understand the value of that early feedback. And if teams can think about making it safe for the managers, so how you talk about it will help that as well.
Yeah, I think the purpose aspect is also super important here. I think what you also mentioned in your speech was about, if you cannot, you don't change management, you don't change people. What you can change is actually an environment, and environment usually makes people to change. So one aspect probably that we can tackle as well, considering the question, is environment, or the bigger the bigger surroundings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, Jenni. It was a pleasure to have you here. For the folks who were on the track, don't forget to leave the feedback to Jenni and to the organizers. We are eager to learn what you think about it. And the next speech is starting in 12 minutes. So stay tuned. And the next speech is from Bob. and about COVID-19 and a catalyst. Is it a catalyst for agility? Stay tuned. See you soon.
Thank you.